Have you ever heard of the original tanks of the ancient world? No, I'm not talking about siege engines. I'm talking about the cataphracts, the heavily armored cavalry that dominated the battlefields of the late Roman and Byzantine empires for nearly 1,000 years. These guys were the special forces of their day, a terrifying sight for any enemy who dared to face them. So, what made the cataphract so special? Let's start with the armor. Imagine a rider and his horse, both almost completely encased in metal. The soldier wore a lamella cuirass, made of overlapping small plates of iron or bronze, along with splintered armor protecting his arms and legs, called greaves and vamp. His head was protected by a conical helmet, often with a mail aventail, covering his neck and shoulders. Even his face might be covered by a mask, making him look like an intimidating, inhuman warrior. The horse wasn't left out either. It was draped in a thick quilted blanket, or even its own set of lamellar armor, known as a barding. This head-to-hoof protection made them nearly impervious to arrows and light infantry attacks. But it wasn't just about defense. The cataphract was an offensive powerhouse. Their primary weapon was the contos, a massive two-handed lance around 12 feet long. Unlike the lances of later medieval knights, the contos was often wielded with both hands for maximum impact. A disciplined charge from a unit of cataphracts was like a freight train hitting a brick wall. They would crash into enemy formations, shattering shield walls and breaking the morale of even the most seasoned soldiers. The sheer psychological impact of these metal-clad giants bearing down on you was often enough to win the battle before it even began. Once the initial charge was over and the contos was broken or discarded, the cataphract wasn't finished. They were armed to the teeth with secondary weapons. A long, heavy sword called a spathion was a standard sidearm, perfect for close-quarters combat once they were in the thick of the enemy ranks. Many also carried a mace or an axe, ideal for crushing helmets and breaking through armor that a sword couldn't penetrate. Some cataphracts were even trained as horse archers, carrying a composite bow to soften up enemy lines before the final, devastating charge. This versatility made them adaptable to almost any situation on the battlefield. The cataphracts weren't just a random assortment of heavy cavalry, they were the elite, professional core of the Byzantine army. Their origins can be traced back to the Eastern horsemen of Persia and Parthia, but the Romans, and later the Byzantines, perfected the concept. They were organized into units called banda, and were subjected to rigorous training and discipline. Military manuals from the period, like the Strategicon, attributed to Emperor Maurice, detailed the complex formations and tactics they used. They could perform feigned retreats, flanking maneuvers, and disciplined charges, all while maintaining perfect cohesion. This level of professionalism set them apart from many of their barbarian or feudal counterparts. So, why did they disappear? Like all great military units, their time eventually came to an end. The decline of the Byzantine Empire meant there were fewer resources to equip and maintain such an expensive force. The armor and specialized horses required a massive investment that the dwindling empire could no longer afford. Furthermore, the nature of warfare began to change. The rise of new enemies, like the highly mobile Seljuk Turks with their horse archer tactics, and later the Western European knights during the Crusades, presented challenges that the traditional cataphract struggled to counter effectively. By the 12th century, their role on the battlefield had been largely replaced by more flexible, less heavily armored cavalry units. Even though they faded into history, the legacy of the cataphracts is undeniable. They were the ultimate heavy cavalry of their time, a symbol of Byzantine military might, and a direct ancestor to the medieval knights of Europe. They proved that a combination of heavy armor, devastating firepower, and professional discipline could dominate warfare for centuries. The image of the armored horseman, a steel-clad titan on the battlefield, owes a huge debt to these incredible soldiers of the Eastern Roman Empire. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into military history, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you next time.